That's the camera you speak into.
Yeah. Look at the TVs.
Okay, it looks like you're broadcasting.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. It is Tuesday, October 13th, 2020. I am calling this meeting to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so I invite you to join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and
to
to
the
the republic
for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all. Thank you to everyone who is joining us. You will note this is now our second Board of Ed meeting where we have some of our members and some of our administrators in person and others on Zoom. I again will encourage my colleagues on the Zoom, if there's a point in time in which it is difficult to hear us in the room, please flag that for us. The first item, or the next item, is action on the minutes.
Yes, to make the agenda.
Oh, sorry, thank you. I have a note right here. My apologies. The first item is a request of the board to add an agenda item 9.11 to our meeting tonight. This agenda item would be to approve Guilford Public Schools priorities and objectives. This was the discussion item for our workshop meeting 2 weeks ago. Is there a motion to add 9.11 to the agenda?
So moved.
Mrs. Sullivan, Mrs. Peck, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. September 14, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved. Second.
All right. Are there any?
That was Dr. Hirsch and Mr.
Yes,
Delaventure.
thank you. I will keep doing that. Are there any corrections to these minutes? All right. All in favor? Aye.
I see unanimous consent.
All right. And action on the minutes of September 29th, 2020. This was our workshop meeting. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Sands is a motion. Ms. Peck is a second. Any questions or corrections? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any concerns? No. All right. So that is also a unanimous vote. In lieu of public forum, we are continuing to ask community members to reach out to Dr. Freeman, myself, or any board member, and we will most certainly respond. Mrs. Sullivan, you are the reviewer of finances for the month.
I am. I can tell you that for the month of September, the expenditures were $4,846,376.44. The encumbrances and expenditures through the end of September puts us at 21.1% of the budget, as compared to last year where we were very similar, 21.27% of the budget. We had some revenue this month, of $28.86, which was some Medicaid reimbursement and then pre-K tuition. The rest of the report we did go into great detail in our operations committee. So unless there are additional questions, that would be a motion to approve the September 2020 financials.
There is a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, John Delaventure.
Okay. Any further questions? As Mrs. Sullivan noted, we did just complete our operations committee meeting and did discuss the financials and the warrants in depth. Hearing no further questions or comments, all in favor of approving the financials for September 2020?
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? All right, that is unanimous. Communications. I will note in communications over the last several weeks, we have gotten several communications. I counted at least 29 stating support for the consideration of addressing and enhancing the existing curriculum in terms of social justice issues. We had 5 expressing some concern and or asking questions. It has been brought to our attention that there are a couple of petitions that have been presented to the board, and the board will certainly look into those. Any other communications that a board member needs to let us know about now? All right. Next item on the agenda, student representative. So excited to have you back. Yes, Ted's clapping. So I'm going to turn it over to our student representatives for their reports. Either of you can go.
But you both have to mute.
I'll start. So to begin, to talk about Guilford Lakes Elementary School, back to school has been a good transition. All the students are very good about wearing masks and following directions and keeping with protocol. Even the youngest preschool kids are doing really well with that. All the schools I checked in with said that they were doing well with that, so that's a good thing. The PTO has been very encouraging and supporting to all the staff, providing lunch for back to school, and recently providing coffee and soft drinks as a pickup. The nursing staff, who are all brand new employees, are settling in nicely and working really hard to keep everyone safe and healthy. And the vast majority of students are logging in for synchronous lessons when they are at home. So all good positive feedback for Lakes. Then moving on to AW Cox, students and staff have been excited to be back together, both in person and virtually. Students are doing a really good job learning and following new procedures and protocols. They've been serious about keeping everyone in the school community safe and healthy. Cox spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year to build classroom communities based on kindness and compassion. Daily activities provide opportunities for students and staff to get to know one another, which promotes a classroom environment where students feel safe. In the hybrid model, teachers have been presenting mini lessons to all students several times a day. Through technology, students are working together in small groups to discuss literacy tasks and think through math tasks. Students are becoming familiar with online tools that promote problem solving and communication. And in kindergarten, first and second grade, students are engaging in foundational skills to build their reading skills. Now, finally, for Adams, just a couple notes for them. Clubs that can happen virtually will be beginning soon, which is exciting for them. And then for cohort A and B students, they've each had 2 separate spirit days, so they can each kind of settle into normalcy as best they can.
Wonderful, thank you.
So first off, for Calvin Leet Elementary School, at Leet, they focused on building a stronger sense of community, and this is evident with their entire learning community and families. They support the students' social, emotional well-being when they engage in their morning meetings and their SEL time with their teachers and peers. Arrival and dismissal procedures have been going well at Leet as well. The parents' patience and understanding are very greatly appreciated, as well as the devotion, commitment, and positive energy of the staff. They are also amazed and proud of the Leet teachers and their capacity to effectively carry out instruction with all the new adjustments to technology and teaching in a blended model this year. Students are also actively engaged in this hybrid learning model, and they can be seen collaborating and engaged in class discussions with their peers both in person and in virtual class. K through 2 has been adjusting to their foundation skills block very well also. And special thanks to the PTO for giving them their Welcome Back to School banner and masks for all students. Students and staff also celebrated and honored the custodians, John, Lou, and Abby, for Custodian Appreciation Day. The LEAT staff honored Bob Amento with a socially distant breakfast in honor of his service to the students and staff. And finally, they are excited to every day to greet their students, engaging in the new teaching and learning process while showing acts of kindness, compassion, love, and learning in a safe environment. Next, for Melissa Jones, the school year is off to a great start with the students and the teachers both excited to be back together, whether in person or virtually. The Melissa Jones PTO has made the beginning of the school year special for the staff by welcoming them back with inspirational sidewalk chalk sayings. And they also welcomed back students with a gift bag that included a lanyard for holding masks during mask breaks. A socially distant summer reading celebration was also held to thank students for participating in the Governor's Summer Reading Challenge. This celebration included outdoor reading and dancing. National Custodian Day was honored at Melissa Jones too, on Friday, October 2nd, with notes of thanks from students and small items of recognition from families and the Sunshine Committee. Lastly, a few Jones teachers also received grants from the GFFE to purchase items needed for the 2020-21 school year. And for Baldwin Middle School, students and staff have done well in the hybrid model that's been implemented to open the school year. And they are greatly appreciative of the teachers' dedication to provide meaningful learning experiences for the students, whether they are in the classroom in person or virtually at home. And they are also thankful for the parent and community support that they have received as the school year has begun. The students have done a great job of wearing masks and distancing. Parents have been wonderful in following their drop-off procedures and arrival procedures, and this has been a great help during the opening weeks of the school year. As they move to a full opening, Baldwin expects things to continue to go well.
Wonderful. Anybody have questions for?
It's good to have you back. Thanks for doing it.
And how are things going at the high school?
I actually forgot to mention something for the high school. One of the updates that I wrote down was that the theater program was able to do a virtual play.
Yes.
And they usually have like a 24-hour play where kids get to like be really involved and in the school for a long time, and everyone's running around crazy and trying to get stuff done. But since that's a little tough to do now, they all still did the same process of writing their own plays and directing them and executing them. But this time they filmed them and got to show them live and stream it for people who aren't able to watch it in person. So that was a way that they could fundraise and kind of generate excitement about the play that was supposed to be in the spring, but it ended up being now and in a little altered way. So that was a little exciting transition back into school activities and stuff like that. But other than that, I think everything is going pretty well. I know that everyone's glad to be back, and we're glad that most sports can happen. I know I am. And they're going really safely, and all the classes are really safe and spread out and Purelled and everything seems pretty clean. So I don't think there are any real concerns there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I agree. It's great to see you.
Good to see you guys too.
Wonderful. Well, as usual, you are welcome to stay, and we would completely understand if you have other things that you need to do this evening. So great to have you back, and certainly look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent's report. Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balistraci. The first item is a regular standing item at this meeting each year. We update you on the official October 1 enrollment numbers. And so if I can draw your attention to the enrollment information that you had in your packet. This notes for you that currently in our schools, we have 3,079 students who we are supporting with live instruction at this time, or effective October 1st, the official reporting day. I will note for you that on this first grid, we have broken out additional information for you to identify the students who are attending in the hybrid fashion, students who are attending the 4 days a week, and students who are the fully remote. So as we report to the state, we're reporting at Cox, for instance, 198 students who are attending the hybrid model as we have designed. That means they're attending 2 days a week in person, and they're attending 3 days a week at home. We have 21 students at Cox who have elected to be fully remote. They're receiving their instruction 5 days a week remotely at home. And then we have 22 students. These are predominantly students who have special needs, and they're attending school 4 days a week on the Monday, Tuesday, as well as the Thursday, Friday cohort to meet the instruction that they require. The state is requiring us to report out in this way, and so we thought we would break down attendance for you in this way. Obviously, we've never broken it down this way in the past. The next page we have for you, we share annually. It gives you a slightly different look. What's most important is that this breaks down class sizes for you across the elementary schools. And if you go right down to the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that in pre-K through 4, we continue to average 18 students per class. There are 3 class sections in this grid that reach the 20s. We have 3 classes that reach 20 or 21 students. So we're enormously pleased that we were able to keep our class sizes into the teens almost completely across the elementary levels. Additionally, you have the longitudinal look at enrollment. And the last page that you have is the demographic study that we commissioned. But rather than moving you all the way to the last page, I'll just draw your attention to the bar chart. The green line shows our actual attendance, and the orange line, at least it's orange on my version, I think it may be red on some of yours. The orange line predicts the decline in enrollment that we had projected with the demographic study that was commissioned some 10 years ago. So while we are seeing declining enrollment, we're not seeing enrollment declining to the degree that we anticipated. We were projected to be at 2,791 students at this time, not the 3,079 that we currently continue to have enrolled. And an additional piece of information that I wanted to share tonight, and this is not a piece that we usually report out, but we are tracking 68 students this year who have informed us of their intention to homeschool. Last year at this time, we were tracking 26 students who had informed us of their intention to homeschool. And 53 of those 68 are new withdrawals this year who have informed us of their intention to homeschool their students, many of whom let us know that they're looking forward to rejoining the schools once the pandemic has passed, that this is a temporary decision. Again, we don't usually report that information out. It is sometimes difficult for us to accurately track that information, but we thought that this year in particular, it was important to note that increase in homeschooling. That is not unusual. My informal assessment is that that is not unusual across school districts across the state of Connecticut. I don't believe that there is formal data that we can compare that to, but in my conversations with colleagues, many people are seeing similar increases in withdrawals for the purpose of homeschooling this year. So wanted to bring that to your attention.
Predominantly what grades?
They're spread across the district. I could break that out more specifically for you, but as I'm thinking about the letters that are coming in, I think they're spread fairly evenly across the grades. I can certainly answer that question for you as a follow-up. Mrs. Fiandella has that information. And again, most people citing the pandemic as the reason for their decision to do so. And can answer any questions about enrollment if there are any. Again, this is an annual update we're required to deliver.
And I think I mentioned this last time we talked about this last month, but these are now kind of the official look. Small kindergarten numbers.
Sort of anticipated, yep.
Anticipated, so we'll have to watch kindergarten enrollment
Yes.
for next year, which could be
which could boomerang. We're
Right.
actually anticipating there could be a boomerang in kindergarten numbers next year for parents who were on the bubble and chose to hold this year,
Right.
understandably, but therefore we may see larger numbers enrolling next year. Yes, we'll be on the lookout for that. And worth noting that while these have now become our official numbers, we are seeing some fluidity between those hybrid, fully remote, and right. And so we will continue to monitor that. The state is now requiring us to report attendance weekly by those breakdowns. So the state is keeping track of full attendance, hybrid attendance, fully remote attendance, and we'll continue to inform the state of those numbers as well.
All right, any board members with questions or comments about this enrollment report? All right, I think we can go to the next agenda item then.
Thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to update the board and talk with the community a little bit about our social studies curriculum. Dr. Balistraci, as you noted, we have received some communications recently, specifically around the social studies curriculum. And I believe that in our direction that I shared with the community a couple of weeks ago may have generated some confusion around the social studies curriculum. So I do want to clarify and speak to our social studies curriculum and where we are with that curriculum. And let me start by noting that in 2015, the state of Connecticut revised and released new updated social studies standards. Following the release of the new state standards in 2015, we pulled together a curriculum committee. We reviewed and revised our local K through 12 social studies curriculum, and that curriculum was adopted at a public meeting on September 12th of 2016 by the Board of Education. I believe that Mr. Sands served with the committee that did the review, and I remember the meeting at Cox where we shared an overview of the social studies curriculum. That curriculum remains the curriculum from which we are working in the Guilford Public Schools. It was approved in 2016, and it continues to be our curriculum today. That curriculum has not changed, and my communication to the community in September was not the announcement of a new curriculum or the launch of a new curriculum. I do want to make that really clear. We continue to follow the adopted Guilford Public Schools curriculum as approved in public by the Board of Education. That being said, my communication of September 29th did talk about the discussions of what Dr. Jeffries in his TED Talk refers to as hard history. And we talked specifically about applying hard history to the study of the history of slavery in the United States and race and racism in the United States. Again, I want to note that that communication of a couple weeks ago wasn't the first time that we've spoken to that topic. Over the last 12 months, I believe that my office has pushed out some dozen communications around the topic of race and equity and social justice in our schools and in our curricula. And in fact, I don't often do this to the board, but I do want to take the time to read a few pieces. First, I do want to quote from that social studies curriculum that was adopted in 2016. From the introduction to that curricular document, we write, the National Council for the Social Studies defines social studies as the integrated study of the social sciences and humanities to promote civic competence. Within the school program, social studies provides coordinated, systematic study drawing upon such disciplines as anthropology, archaeology, economics, geography, history, law, philosophy, political science, psychology, religion, and sociology, as well as appropriate content from the humanities, mathematics, and natural sciences. The primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an interdependent world. We list several guiding principles on the cover plate of that document, and I want to highlight just a few. First, again, these are guiding principles in our local curriculum. Students develop historical habits of mind through which they question, acquire, and categorize evidence, develop hypotheses, formulate conclusions, and take informed action. Additionally, students as social scientists strive to be fair and impartial as they analyze and evaluate primary and secondary documents from multiple and multicultural perspectives. And finally, through inquiry, students extend their knowledge of civic responsibility, promote responsible active citizenship, and evaluate different perspectives through open expressions of ideas. Those were statements that were included in our social studies document that we approved back in 2016. I also want to note some of what has been shared in those multiple communications that I referenced over these last several months. Last September, on the heels of an incident in which we had, there was an incident in our community that involved blackface. It involved our community and another community from another Connecticut school. In my response to that, to the Guilford community, I wrote, "No incident occurs in isolation. If even one Guilford student felt that wearing blackface was acceptable or funny, then we have more work to do. As a community, we will continue to educate our students about race relations, about racism and racist behaviors, and about ways in which to be more accepting and supportive of all." Following the killing of George Floyd, the entire leadership team, 21 administrators in the Guilford Public Schools, wrote a letter to the Guilford community. And in that communication, we included this section. "As educators, we know that we share the responsibility of bridging the divide that inequity and racism create. School districts play a critical role in bringing people together, and by joining with our community, we can create change. But we also know that words are not enough. We must unite in more than a call to action to effect change. We must take purposeful action to address systemic injustice." And in late June of this school year, when this board voted unanimously to discontinue the use of a Native American mascot at Guilford High School, I wrote to the community and I included these words. "As a school system, we are committed to conducting a curricular audit and to continue teacher training around the topics of race, racism, justice, equity, and identity. We are committed not to erasing Guilford's history, but to evaluating it and to interrogating it in a healthy educational manner. We are committed to removing racist symbols, not as a way to avoid talking about race, but rather as a visible first step in talking more openly about racism." The communication in the TED Talk that I shared a couple of weeks ago is not an indication of a new direction in Guilford Public Schools. I shared it because I felt that it clarified the curriculum as written, as adopted back in 2016. And I wanted to remind the community of the commitment that we have made and that we have continued to voice around these topics over these last several months. In June, when this board was taking up the topic in public of our Native American mascot at the high school, we heard over and over again, I think most passionately from current students and recent graduates, that they expected us to continue this work and not to use the pandemic as an excuse for shelving the conversations about race and equity and social justice in our schools. And so again, when I shared that our direction 2 weeks ago, and when I shared the TED Talk from Dr. Jeffries, I shared it particularly because of the example that Dr. Jeffries used around James Madison and how eloquent he was in being able to express the concept of hard history. Hard history embraces what we said in the document was the inquiry approach to history. Now, I understand that offering that this September gave some people the impression that we were shifting gears or adopting a new curriculum. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I want to clearly say, however, that we were continuing to commit to the work that we have addressed in doing hard history. Now, as often occurs in education, terms get thrown around. So while Dr. Jeffries was using the term hard history, and while I looked at it as the inquiry approach to studying history, I also know that other organizations have used it to label curricula that they use. The Teaching Tolerance Organization has a curriculum arc labeled hard history. We have not purchased that curriculum document. We have not subscribed to that curriculum document, but the underlying idea of looking at conflicting facts in history and recognizing that holding on to the fact that one person can have contradictory evidence around their place in history is what makes history hard. Now, I also want to note that the inquiry approach that we have been talking about around our history, our social studies curriculum, is also embraced in our math curriculum. It is also embraced in our science curriculum. We have built a culture in Guilford where students are expected to do the work. We trust students with big ideas, with incomplete ideas, with contradictory evidence, and we guide them in making their own meanings from that evidence. We don't lead them in the direction that we feel they need to go, but we trust our students to be able to engage in that really challenging work. I want to note for the board and for the community the ways in which we're continuing to do this work, because while I'm saying clearly that this is not a new curriculum or a new direction, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding about the direction that we are embracing. As we returned to school during this pandemic reopening, we committed a half a day for all teachers in the system to talk about culturally responsive environments in their classrooms and instructional pedagogy. At the high school specifically, we had an additional half day where the high school staff talked about how best to support students who identify as non-binary or transgender. We, on September 21st, had our instructional coaches spend an entire day with Dr. Don Seiler from the University of St. Joseph doing further work on culturally responsive instructional techniques. Dr. Crystal has met with social studies teachers over the summer to continue to look at the existing curriculum and talk about how we approach the history topics that are identified in our social studies curriculum, not rewriting the curriculum, but looking at the work that we've identified. We have agreed to continue work with Dr. Don Seiler. In one of the quotes, I mentioned that we had committed to a curricular audit. Dr. Seiler from the University of St. Joseph will be meeting with our social studies teachers in grades 5 through 12, and then with our English language arts teachers in grades 5 through 12. And he will be facilitating our work using a self-study rubric to look at the ways that we instruct in our classroom. The rubric has been designed by Dr. David Kirkland from New York University, and it helps teachers to identify areas where we may be embedding implicit bias into our instruction, or ways that we are not being equitable and inviting all students equally into the instruction that we provide. Additionally, Dr. Seiler will be meeting with students here at the high school to conduct empathy interviews, specifically talking to students of color about their experiences in our school so that we can add a qualitative piece to the quantitative data about how we reach and support all students in our schools. Next week, the leadership team will be meeting with Dr. Sharon Locke, and we will be looking at ways to support equitable and culturally responsive instruction in schools as leaders in our schools. And just recently, I have agreed to participate through the LEARN organization with a group of regional superintendents with Dr. Lee Title out of Harvard to talk about leading learning around the topics of race, racism, and equity, and working collaboratively with other school districts, because we're not the only ones who are engaging in this work in Connecticut or along the shoreline. So again, I really wanted to offer two clarifications. One, I did not announce this September the beginning of a new curriculum or a bunch of ways of looking at history that we were not already engaging in. But I also want to be clear that the Guilford Public Schools is engaging in work around how we teach and how we teach in ways that are culturally responsive and equitable and lead to more social justice in our schools in ways that we reach all of our students. I want to acknowledge and I want to make it clear that I'm aware that that communication caused some consternation and caused some upset, and some people found the TED Talk that was shared to be really provocative. I acknowledge that and I value that, and I assure the community that I want to be responsive to that moving forward. But I also want to name, we've been saying for over a year now that we want to work on the topics of race, inequity, and social justice. You don't do that without feeling uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable to have these conversations. It will make many of us uncomfortable to have these conversations. We need to get comfortable with that discomfort. It is the only way that we will be able to put these items on the table, hear each other respectfully, and do what is best for our children. And what I find really encouraging is that I know this community can do it because we just did it around a Native American mascot. I take real optimism from the process that this board structured and orchestrated around a Native American mascot that had been in place for 70 years, which people felt passionately about in a couple of different ways. We allowed people to have a voice, we listened to people, and I think we made a really respectful and thoughtful decision moving forward. And I think that that's just a small example of how we can have this larger conversation. We can trust our students with really challenging ideas, and we can respect each other in the process and have a really healthy educational environment as we move forward. Again, I apologize for any confusion that my recent communication caused, but I wanted to clear up any of that confusion here tonight.
Wonderful. Are there, yes, Dr. Hirsch.
We'd be in more trouble, or we should be, if we weren't doing this, number one, so that in fact, we among all the schools in the country have to take this on much more explicitly. It's also the case, having been a former social studies teacher in high school, it's nice to see it getting the appropriate attention, although it also suggests that it hasn't been done as well as it should have been in the first place. But it's far more than social studies. Literature, music, art, hard sciences, all of the curriculum is implicated in the inadequacy that that has been true in dealing with these issues that are not discipline oriented in real life. And I know that in fact, we are doing that across the disciplines. The emphasis for the moment has been talking about hard history, but there's hard English, exactly, hard right. Literature, there's hard music, and some of the things that we're having to deal with just defies categorization by discipline. In fact, if our students begin to appreciate the fact that the life is not about classrooms and disciplines per se, but that these things meld together, we'll have been much more successful.
Other board members, comments? I want to make sure I check in with those that are remote as well. Any other thoughts?
Well, it seems to me that Dr. Freeman has clarified quite a bit tonight, but I think that this is a topic that we should look forward to reviewing at the next curriculum committee meeting, which I believe is coming up fairly soon, isn't it, Mary?
Yeah, I was going to mention in the review on the policy and other committees that we actually do plan to dive into this a little bit more, give people a chance to ask more questions, get a little bit more detail and specifics, although I actually really appreciate Dr. Freeman's comments and his information. But hopefully we'll have more time to just talk amongst ourselves and with the community on October 26th coming up.
And thank you, Mr. Sands and Dr. Best. You both reminded me of something I failed to mention. The information that Dr. Seiler helps us to develop through both the self-study with the rubric, which is primarily teacher work, and through the empathy interviews with students in our schools, will be shared with the board and unpacked in public. That will not be information that we hold closely. It will be information that we share, and likely Dr. Seiler will be joining you later in the school year to share the process and the revelations that come out of that work. Thank you. That will be work that is, as in the past, when we've brought in outside experts to look at the way that we differentiate instruction or how we use time, particularly in the mornings and bus routes in the school system. When we ask outside experts to come in and take an honest look at us, we share those evaluations. That is not information that is held close to the vest. That is public, and that will be shared with the community.
I also think that there is a certain confusion in the community as to whether we have changed the textbooks that we are going to be using for social studies. And let me just remind everybody that as we're going to discuss later today, anytime we change a textbook that's used in the system, this has to go through a rigorous review at the board level. And I don't recall any recent changes to textbooks in the social studies area, particularly some of the names that have been floated around on social media. These are not approved textbooks, and these are not changes to the textbooks we're using. And so I think people are somewhat confused, frankly.
So that's exactly right, Mr. Sands, but I do want to add one nuance to that. I also want to make clear that the curricula in the Guilford Public Schools, not just in the area of social studies, but all of our curricula are authored by teachers locally, and they are written to allow for wide teacher latitude. We do not subscribe to strictly scripted curricula in this school system, quite honestly, because we've got the best teachers around. And our teachers do have the ability. The social studies curriculum that I read, lengthy references to supplemental materials, and our teachers are not limited only to the supplemental materials that we reference. You know, I'm watching Mr. Russo nod his head. Our teachers are capable of going out and supplementing the experiences that we provide for our students by adding really rich materials, often really current materials, and we encourage them to do that. So all of the foundational components in textbooks, you're exactly right, will be approved in public by the Board of Education, but we also supplement, and that is often the richest part of the experience. And I don't ever want to evolve the Guilford Public Schools curricula to a place where we limit teachers' ability to engage with their subject, their content, and their students in ways that are current and relevant and engaging for the kids in our classrooms. I really do appreciate the time to be able to speak on this tonight.
I think it's wonderful. You know, as I sat through our meetings in June and our discussions around the mascot and the many communications we received with concerns about the mascot, but also curricula. I just think that we have this amazing opportunity to really all learn together, but also an opportunity for students, as you suggested, to really dive in and inquire and learn and form their opinions based on a wide variety of material. And I think that's what education is all about, right? Like, our emphasis is not about teaching them one thing, but opening up the world of education to them and guiding them on thinking through challenging and difficult materials, whether it's math or science or history or English. So, so thank you for the clarification for anyone who's concerned, because as I noted, we did have a couple of people who were asking questions in their communication to us. And again, we had a large number of people who were really in their communications quite excited about the opportunities for students to really expand their knowledge in this area. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next agenda item? All right. 8.3, an update on reopening plans.
Yeah, and so this is a big topic. So the community knows that in the beginning of the school year, we had targeted October 19th as a date that we were looking at for implementing a full reopening of our schools. I hope that we communicated clearly that that was a target and that we intended to reevaluate all along the way. We have been doing that. So we have been watching the numbers both regionally here in and around Guilford and at a state level. We've been watching the numbers for COVID spread. We've also been looking at the protocols and the practices and the guidelines that we put in place in each of our schools. And we've been evaluating the efficacy and the effectiveness of those protocols in real time as we've now been in school for a little over a month. At this time, after consulting with the state, after consulting really closely with our local health authorities here in Guilford and with our leadership team, after getting lots of feedback from members of the community, from parents particularly who have been contacting us around this topic, I do want to inform the community that at this moment in time, we are planning on modifying that intended reopening for October 19th. I have not communicated this with the public yet because I want to have the opportunity to give the board the time to fully engage with this plan tonight here before we make it formal and public. However, what we know now is that Guilford, locally in Guilford, we have some of the best numbers in the region around COVID spread. Our numbers have remained very low and they have remained very controlled locally, specifically here in Guilford. On the other hand, at a state level, we know that we're seeing increasing COVID numbers like we haven't seen since last June. And so we've got the balance of really good locally and some concern that is growing outside of Guilford at the greater level of the state. As we look at our systems and programs in the schools, K through 6, we are strictly cohorting our students. Student movement is curtailed and students are part of only one classroom. Classrooms that in most places I showed you are averaging 18 students. And in this current hybrid model, we've only got half of those students, roughly half, coming on any 2 days of the week. 7 through 12, however, because of the complexities of the scheduling and the nature of the schools, we have not followed such strict cohorting. At Adams, students are exposed to a full team of students. And so in the current hybrid model, they're exposed to approximately 50 or 60 students on any given day. At the high school, we essentially have worked with masks and social distancing and low class sizes, but there is very little cohorting that can happen at the high school. At Adams and the high school, the only cohorting that is currently occurring is what's embedded in the hybrid model, with half of the population on Monday, Tuesday, and the other half on Thursday, Friday. Therefore, as we approach October 19th, we do intend to begin to take another step towards a full opening. To be specific, we intend to move all elementary students to the 4-day model. We will approach full opening in grades K through 6. All students will be invited to attend full days of school 4 days a week. All students will be in on Monday and Tuesday, and all students will be in on Thursday and Friday. We intend to continue Wednesdays as a fully remote distance learning day. 7 through 12 at Adams and the high school, we intend to continue in the hybrid model. We want to push our window back. We want to continue to watch the state numbers as they develop, because again, we're not limiting student exposure at those levels to just 20 students. Additionally, we want to continue to look at our protocols around things like lunchways. You heard Mr. Gurnham speak in an earlier meeting that we have tents up and running. We have more separation materials like the plexiglass we're meeting through tonight. We want to get more of those items in place, and we want to continue to look at the local protocols and continue to watch those state numbers for at least another 2 to 3 weeks before we consider opening the high school or Adams more fully. I want to speak about the Wednesday because I want to be clear about the Wednesday specifically at the elementary level. After speaking again with our local health authorities, when we initiate contact tracing, the look back from the positive identification is a 2-day window. Our local health authorities have found the hybrid model to be very effective because of that Wednesday off. When they have a positive identification, we've got two-day chunks of time that they can look at. By maintaining the Wednesday off, it will facilitate that contact tracing. It will allow us a midweek day to do a thorough cleaning of the building, as well as the weekends to conduct a thorough cleaning of the building. It is for those 2 reasons that we are looking to maintain the full distance learning. I do want to add, and this has only started to creep into my thinking over the last few days, while it didn't drive us to this decision, I do think it's an important benefit. I think we all need to remember that we have looming on a horizon somewhere the possibility of needing to retreat to full distance learning later in this fall or in the winter if those state numbers that we're looking at become worse. I actually believe there's a real instructional benefit for keeping our youngest students responsible for 1 day a week of distance learning. I worry that if we simply went to fully open for the next 5, 6, or 7 weeks and then needed to close fully, that our students would be less able to easily transition back to that remote environment. So again, I want to be clear, it was not one of the 2 driving factors that led us to the decision, but I think it's a tertiary good that I see as I look at the decision moving forward. So again, to be clear, starting on this coming Monday, October 19th, the elementary schools and Baldwin, our grades K through 6, will invite all students in for full days of instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. That means cohort A and B come in on Monday, Tuesday. Cohorts A and B come in on Thursday, Friday. I want to remind the community that that cohort of students will still only increase to 18 in most elementary classes, and only our largest elementary class across the district is 21. That's the largest cohort that those students would be exposed to. At Adams and at the high school, grades 7-12, we are extending the current existing hybrid model in the same setting that you are experiencing now. Cohort A comes in on Monday and Tuesday, cohort B comes in on Thursday and Friday, and those 2 days of in-person instruction are balanced by 3 days of distance remote learning that occurs. We're continuing to look at the remote learning and refine our practice and improve our practice as we move forward. We hope that this is not a permanent condition. We're not suggesting that we'll remain in hybrid at the high school and Adams for the entire school year, but at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks, we need to look at our local protocols and keep an eye on these increasing state numbers to make sure we're making the right decision for health before we focus on the instructional decision moving forward. I know that's a lot of information that I just shared with the board. I want to answer any questions that you have, of course. And then this will be a big bit of information for the community as well.
The question I have right off the bat is, if not now, when? We set up these metrics, and individually, I felt very good about them. We're well within the metrics at this point to be going back full time. So the question is, what are we looking for in 2 to 3 weeks that's going to allow us to say we should, send students back to school?
So that's the really important question. One, I would want to see leveling in the state numbers. I would want to see the state numbers. I agree with you that the raw number we're at is still positive. It's the rate of increase that I believe has us concerned. And so we want to make sure that those numbers can level out or begin to tail back down. And 2, we really do want to refine our practices, particularly around things like lunch at the high school, right? That is one of our local health directors' concerns right now. And so we will be meeting with our high school administrative staff. Again, we've got the tents online. We're looking at putting heating in the tents. We're bringing in more furniture. We're bringing in more dividers. I want our local health director to be more comfortable with the procedures that we have in place, because we don't provide that tight, strict cohorting of just 20 students. When we open the doors fully at the high school student today moves through the building with about 500 students in the school. When we open the doors fully, they're going to move through the building with 1,100 students in the school. I called the state yesterday and I wanted to know how many high schools of over 1,000 are open fully in the state. Interestingly, the state can't give you the information in that form, right? The state is scrambling to monitor this. What they were able to give me was a list of all the high schools that reported being fully open 2 weeks ago. I could take that information and look up the population of those schools myself. And what I can tell you is that most of the high schools that report being fully open are smaller than 1,000 and some significantly smaller than 1,000. Most of the local high schools on the shoreline that are open fully have populations of 500 or 600 or 700, which is closer to our hybrid model than to our fully open model. So we're not soon. I hope the answer to your question is, if not on the 19th, when? I hope that answer is soon, and we're going to work really hard to try to achieve that. But we're also keeping in the back of our mind, again, even needing to move in the other direction. I believe Hartford Public Schools is taking a step backwards this week, where the high schools are going from hybrid to fully distant, and the elementaries are going from fully open to hybrid. We're continuing to watch all those movements around the state, and I hope the answer is soon.
Other board members? Questions? Go ahead, Moira.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that we're kind of taking a careful approach to this. I understand, Paul, that the biggest challenge is probably likely our lunch waves, especially at the high school. And in speaking to our local health director, I know you're and with Cliff earlier in our operations committee meeting, there's some talk about, making some adjustments, but short of having, students, I don't think we can have students stay in the classroom, because I don't believe we have enough classroom space to accommodate students staying in the classroom for lunches. Is that true? That we kind of need those kids to be moving to the communal lunchroom space at certain times of the day?
Yeah, I want to be careful about answering that. Absolutely.
That's fine.
Yes, that is part of the concern. Yes, the high school was sort of built with the idea of housing 300 students in that commons for large chunks of the day. And we've worked really hard this year to bring class sizes down at the high school. So that does get to some degree exacerbated by the work we've done on making sure that we have really small class sizes. We have increased from 3 lunch waves to 4 lunch waves at the high school. That did a lot to bring the number down immediately. Again, I think that the plexiglass dividers that Cliff told us are en route and should be here will help. But again, I want to be able to launch those dividers and have our health director come in and walk while we've got a lunch wave of 130 before we move up to a lunch wave of 250 or 260, which at 4 lunch waves is about the number that we're running. We are looking to do ancillary spaces. Again, we're using one of the tents is committed exclusively to lunch space during the lunch waves. I know that the tent was done in such a way that it will allow heating so that we don't lose access to that in inclement weather. But again, we just need some more time to develop that. And I want to be clear for the community. We were really confident with our plan when it was on paper, but we also needed to be honest with ourselves and walk the building and experience the building while it was populated, and wanted our health director to be part of that experience. And so everybody feels really confident with the building loaded to 500 to 600 kids. I think you heard the student reps today say that everything feels controlled and safe. We're concerned about releasing that to the full population without having some more supports in place and addressing that with our health director.
Okay, thanks. And just as a sidebar, your image of the Guilford BOE has gone black in terms of Zoom right now. So it's just a technical thing, but we can't see you right now. Yep.
Thank you, Jason. Can you make sure? We'll check that.
Yep.
It's interesting. We still see it on our screen.
I can still see it.
You can? Okay, so
Yes.
maybe it's just something from my.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
To start with, we're all
Something must have happened with mine. Yeah, and Paul, I totally believe that that's probably one of the biggest hindrances is our lunch wave. And I know in Adams right now, the kids are eating in classrooms. Is that correct? Yeah. So to add another, 10 kids to a classroom and expect them all to eat safely in a small classroom, how are they thinking about, are there any thoughts behind that? How that
Yes.
might?
Mr. Regan is working on ancillary spaces for lunches so that we don't significantly increase the number of students who are eating in those classrooms. But exactly right. That's one of the pieces that as we lived it and experienced it, we didn't just want to bring those lunch settings up from 10 to 20. So we're looking at ancillary locations where we can have, again, small groups, but continuing to keep those lunch groups at about the size they're at now and not doubling those lunch groups.
Thank you.
Again, I do want to reiterate, we have always suggested that this was going to be a fluid plan. I know that it's late to have the information out, but on the other hand, we wanted to wait as long as possible before making a final decision so that we had, one, the best data from around the state, and two, give ourselves the most amount of time to make any adjustments that we could make along the way. I am excited that we're going to be opening up the opportunity of 4-day-a-week in-person instruction for our youngest students who in many ways need it the most. While we all know that distance learning is not perfect, I do think that our students in grades 7-12 are most able to be more independent and more self-supporting in that work than our youngest students. I know it's only 4 days a week. I know that it's going to make Wednesdays challenging for parents at home, but I'm glad that we're at least, bringing students back for those 4 days a week at those youngest grades. We're excited about that opportunity.
Dr. Freeman, in speaking to some of the teachers that I've spoken to, they stress the importance of the half-day Wednesdays right now for content planning and whatnot. Has there been any thought to continuing that even with the remote Wednesdays?
Yeah, thank you for that. So we plan on continuing to do the full remote Wednesdays and continuing to follow the early release schedule that we're following now. Yes, I think that's enormously important because it gives the teachers a degree of flexibility that they absolutely need right now. And what these teachers are shouldering an enormous load. And again, we know that Wednesdays is going to impact by keeping a distance, but maintaining that early release schedule, it provides the teachers just a little bit of planning time that they desperately need. Thank you for asking the question. I failed to mention that. It's an important detail.
Going forward, let's say a month from now, and if at the K through 6 level, if that is continuing to do well, would you consider going to 5 days from 4?
Yes, absolutely. So again, our goal is to have every Guilford student in a full day of classes 5 days a week, returning back to as close to normal as possible. So each of these moves is considered a step towards that fuller opening. We are not done. We want to keep improving and keep moving towards 5 days a week of in-person instruction for all students. If we can do it in a way that is safe and healthy and breeds confidence in our students and our teachers and in our parent community. But that's the goal, Mr. Sands. We're still working towards it.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I had a couple of disparate questions. Drop off, transportation drop off and pickup at elementary schools involvement will now potentially double.
Yes, we're continuing to encourage parents to drive students whenever possible to help reduce density on the school buses. That does mean that parent drop off and pickup at the elementary schools will be twice what it has been, twice what parents have been experiencing during this opening. Now, the good news is that we're all practiced at this now. Everybody knows which driveway to pull into, which one to pull out of. We won't have traffic going in, at cross purposes. But yes, we do anticipate, and I have already been in contact with Chief Hyatt. Yep, we've already been in contact with Guilford Police. He's aware that we're having this conversation tonight. We will be increasing elementary drop off and pick up double, essentially. We will be increasing at Baldwin, but not at Adams, which is a shared run. So it'll be more congested at Baldwin, but won't be more congested at Adams. And then there will be no change in the high school run at this time. Thank you.
And I guess, again, we've said from the beginning, right? And I'm sure it's a common echoing across school districts across the country that that flexibility has to be the key. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Is there a way we can think about when the next check-in is, right? When is the next time we reassess? I'm thinking of, is there a way to give parents a sense that in 3 weeks?
Yes, I think the first week in November. Yes, I think we need to say 3 weeks out.
This is where, and it doesn't mean, I think, one of the things we've learned here is it doesn't mean that what we're hoping to get to will automatically happen, but I think defined chunks of time are
Yes.
at least a little bit easier for parents to plan around, whether you're a elementary school parent who still now has Wednesday to cover, or whether you're a parent who has a kid who's wondering when the next decision might be made.
And I hate that we're doing it this way. Like, I cannot believe that we're planning a school district in chunks of 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But yes, I do think that 3 weeks is the right frame of time. I think it gives us significant time for those state numbers to develop. And I think that's a reasonable amount of time for us to look at our internal protocols and determine whether or not we're getting closer to making that move. Yes.
And can you help, it sounds like, but I just think it would be helpful for me and for everyone to hear. These are decisions that are being made with our local public health official as well, obviously with state guidance, but I understand, she was literally walking the high school
On Friday.
Making determinations of what she thought was safe and what she thought was still not within a safety protocol, or at least think she had concerns.
Yes, I want to be really clear that we asked her to identify her areas of concern, right? And so, again, not to simply foist a responsibility of mine onto some other public official.
But this is not you making a sole decision. This is a collaborative effort along the way.
She was with us in active lunch duties on Friday so that we could observe it in motion. And we were sitting down and looking at the most recent numbers that we had, both locally and at a state level. I pulled them again this morning. So yes, we're collaborating at the state level. We're coordinating at the state level. We're collaborating with other local districts. We're working really closely with our local health official as well as our advising physician, and then making the best decisions that we can in chunks of time that are 3 to 4 weeks. And I know how challenging that is for families, but it is simply the best and the most responsive way that we know how to approach this right now.
I will say, to echo what Dr. Freeman said earlier, I've been trying to spend some time just getting a sense of what was happening in different districts across the state. And it is unfortunate that we don't yet have some kind of centralized system. I've mentioned before that I am on a listserv with other board chairs. So I know what sometimes individual districts are doing. I know that some of them have indeed pulled back. They were expecting to go full capacity and had to decide or made a decision not to. There are some districts that are, I won't remember the name, full capacity, and then board chair noted that they have 88 kids in K through 8 or something like that. So there are also school districts who are dealing with much fewer numbers. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are school districts that are reporting fully opening, but they're carrying 30% of their population in full distance learning. So in our hybrid model, we are only carrying 9 to 10% of our students who are in full distance learning. And so, right, there are districts that are reporting that they're fully open, but by default and by parent decision, they're actually closer to hybrid than they are to fully open.
It's interesting to say that, I can say that as well. Again, I don't have a full accounting of 169 districts or even close. I will say the numbers I've seen, I don't think I've seen a school district among those that I've seen that have a smaller group that are remote, that at 10 or 11%.
About as low as it gets.
I want to say Waterbury has 40 or 50% of the kids started out remote. Obviously a very different whole host of reasons,
yeah.
But there is a range, right? I've heard a lot of 15% and 17%, and those impact as well as you're suggesting.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any implications moving
Well,
forward.
and we're concerned to watch that number. We want to very carefully watch what happens to that number as we make this change at the elementary level and as we delay at elementary and Baldwin level and then delay at the Adams and high school level. So we're very curious to watch that number. It is important to know for parents that they continue to have the option of holding their students for a full 5 days of distance learning. If this change is concerning, parents still do have that option, although we believe that we are offering a safe and a controlled environment. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't thoroughly believe that.
Amy,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Sam.
frankly, I'm having a very hard time hearing you. I can hear everybody else, but you're cutting in and out.
Okay, I will try to be even louder. Thank you for letting me know.
Where are we with bus ridership? I mean, I wonder if the comfort level with families as it starts to increase is going to increase bus ridership. Is there any indication of what we're at right now in terms of percentage of students riding bus?
It remains very low. Jason just shared with me a ridership survey. We had that count, but I apologize. I neither committed it to memory nor brought it with me tonight. Jason, do you remember off the top of your head?
I do not, but I know that
it's very low.
Yeah, it's very low. And Mr. Doran is already looking at what would that mean if we went full in terms of the spacing on the buses, and he was fairly confident they can maintain adequate space with the increase or move to full with the current ridership percentages.
We really do appreciate the parents who are doing the driving because it does really provide relief on those buses. It is also worth noting that we know that we have restricted bus service as well. And so again, in the past, it was not unusual for students in the afternoons to ride different buses for any number of reasons. We would transport students to after school care or activities or friends' houses. We really have restricted every child to only one bus this year. And so again, it helps to facilitate contact tracing when necessary. It helps to reduce spread. And we really appreciate the patience that the community has extended to us because all of these compromises create impacts at home for the families. We are acutely aware of that, but we do believe it has allowed us to be open for in-person schooling with a really low percentage of students who aren't comfortable coming back for that in-person experience. And so all of the compromises we think have allowed us to do that and do that fairly well. We know that it's not perfect, but we're proud with what we've been able to pull together in this environment.
Any last thoughts, questions?
I had a quick question. It just, as we're discussing this and since now we are thinking that 7 through 12 will be continuing to do distance learning, I just wondered if you could comment on how you feel, distance learning is going. how do you feel that some of the emphasis on live streaming that we discussed, using Zoom meetings, things like that, how that's going? And I would note along with that, as Mr. Sands said, I'm actually also having a little bit of trouble hearing you, and wondering if there are any technological issues that are coming up, similar to what we might be experiencing tonight, in terms of audio or visual or anything like that.
Kevin, it sounds like our local mics are cutting out to the remote feed. I don't know. So the quick answer, Dr. Best, is that yes, students at home are occasionally experiencing the same frustrations that you guys at home are experiencing right now. These board meetings over your last two meetings are a pretty good analog to what a blended hybrid class looks like. Again, the good news is that for our youngest students who have required the greatest degree of parental support to try to get this stuff up and working, we're making that move to 4 days a week. We continue to be a work in progress. Again, I have the luxury of being able to talk with other school districts all over the state, and I think that we're doing relatively well. But for the teachers and the parents and the students who are only spending their time here in the Guilford Public Schools and don't have that frame of reference, we know that it is challenging. It is difficult to be remote when a group of people are talking locally in a place. Zoom actually struggles. A complete Zoom meeting and a complete in-person meeting both work really well. This middle ground where some of you are on Zoom and some of us are in person is the most challenging, and so we're continuing to learn about that. There are other platforms that we're beginning to look at. We're using Seesaw at the elementary level as well as Zoom or Google Meets. I mean, the name is escaping me about there was another platform where it was a way to share media during one of the during
Oh, we can use things like
Pear Deck, that's it. So
there's other things.
we're uncovering other platforms or other ancillary materials that are helping, and teachers are getting better at it day by day. To John's point, to Mr. Delventura's point, it's one of the reasons that the Wednesday becomes important, that we continue a condensed schedule, because teachers are sharing their learning, they're sharing tricks, they're sharing what's working. I do want to note for the board, I probably should have made this a formal agenda item. We have posted for the addition of a second technology integration specialist position. We need to bring in more coaching for teachers as they work with the technology. So it's yet another unbudgeted position that is a result of the pandemic that we find ourselves in, but we thought it was really important. So we're advertising and looking to begin interviewing so that teachers have that greater level of support. Our instructional coaches are attempting to continue to focus on pedagogy and teaching and learning, but they're doing technology work as well. So I think it's going well, Dr. Best. I don't think it's going as well as it should be going at this time, and we're continuing to effort that.
Do you have any plans to survey parents like you did last year? And this would probably only be related to the 7 through 12 again, in terms of the distance learning, what's working, what's not, things like that?
Yes, absolutely. We wanted to get a significant amount of time behind us, but yes. I never give one-word answers. That made me really
I was gonna say.
I just feel good about that.
Any other, go ahead, Lauren.
Just very quickly, Paul, I would imagine that communication will go out as soon as possible to parents to be able to plan for this change.
We took the liberty of mocking one up so that if this meeting didn't change it, it would be ready to go as soon as we adjourn tonight. But we're also ready to make any changes to that if this conversation led us in the direction of any significant adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Freeman, what would the retreat be if we wind up going 4 days with the younger kids? Would the retreats, do we still have the option of going back to 2 days so we're not losing all of it as opposed to just going full?
Yes, that's a really good question, and it makes things all the more complicated, but yes. So assuming that we launch this and then the local numbers begin to tick up, or we begin to get a little concerned, We would now have the opportunity to retreat back to a 2-day-a-week hybrid model, or if the local concerns seemed more immediate, to retreating all the way back to fully remote. But yes, we're opening up, again, to Mr. Sand's point, we hope to keep taking incremental steps forward. But if we need to, we can take incremental steps backward. There's nothing it's not shoots and ladders. There's nothing that says we have to go all the way back to the beginning.
I think this plan sounds excellent. I really think it sounds extremely well thought out. I like it. My son's not going to be happy. He said to me today, he's in 2nd grade. He's like, oh, that means I have to pay attention.
Yes, tell him I said that's what this means.
Hunter's going to be disappointed, but I think this is great. I think those younger kids really are in need of getting in front of teachers more often.
Thank you.
In terms of kind of putting a date out there for the families that are really concerned about getting their kids back to school. You mentioned 2 to 3 weeks. Is that realistic that, that we're going to kind of draw a line right there, or is it another approach of wait and see? I know the families are just looking for answers, right? And that's kind of, as a group, we can only do our best to try, to put a date out there. So it sounds like the first week of November is realistic to be revisiting this.
I think it's fair to say that yes, but I've been beating myself up over whether or not putting a hard date of October 19th was a good thing or a bad thing. Right. So did we do anybody any favors by letting people believe that we were going to be fully open on the 19th, and now we're pulling back on that? So we tried a hard date from the beginning with the 19th. I think a soft date of the first week of November is fair for a reassessment. Again, we don't know if we'll take another incremental step, if we'll hold, if we'll go backwards. And to be really clear, there's nothing that says that we don't make an emergency announcement overnight. There were districts out the shoreline to the east of us that were planning on being opened on a Tuesday morning following a long weekend. And they ended up having to announce that Monday that they were staying in the full hybrid model because there were more concerns further out. We know that Norwich is a center of concern. We know that Groton and New London are centers of concern. I think if we were on the other side of the river, we might not even be taking this incremental step. I think the conversation tonight would be that we're holding where we are. I
think that's the important part to stress. No, I think that's the most important part to stress, is that it is so fluid. That
yes.
It is going to change how they play.
Yep.
And I do think that the district has done a great job informing all of us parents that this is it's a constantly moving target. Every correspondence that we get from the principals addressing the 19th as the potential start date has a giant capital letters, unless you hear otherwise.
Great big asterisk.
I feel like it's been very clear to the GPS community that this is all subject to change at a moment's notice.
I do want to share that the principals have been part of all of this conversation, and a lot of this has been filtered through what they're experiencing at the school level. And I want to give enormous credit. Thank you for recognizing how hard they're working at communicating, but they've been integral in all of the decision making as well. Their experience on the ground in the buildings with their students and teachers is really important to informing decisions like these.
All right. Unless anyone has anything further.
I've got one last item that's associated with that
Okay.
that I'd like to share.
Sure.
I also want to share that we've had a lot of communication around, in one of our student reps noted the athletic events, and that most of our sporting events have been able to continue at the high school. To date, they have continued without spectators, and there's been a lot of concern that we have locked down all of our athletic events to no spectators at all. Across the state, for those outdoor experiences, as the state is moving to level 3, many districts are beginning to relax the requirements. We would like to do similarly. As we move further into this athletic season, for outdoor events only, we intend to begin allowing each student or each athlete to have 2 spectators attend outdoor events only, with masks, socially distanced. The limit will allow us to control the numbers. We will expect the crowds. We will be badging the spectators. They will have to have a badge visible at all times. The badges are color coded by sport. You cannot trade those badges from one sport to another with your neighbors. And we will expect the crowds to wear masks and socially distance. In fact, we hope that they are not things, they won't be crowds. We cannot do that for volleyball, which is the only indoor fall sport that we have, but we simply cannot be postponing a full opening of the school because we have these concerns in the building and yet allow spectators for an indoor sport. So we realize that that isn't fair, but outdoor settings are being treated differently at the state level. And we want to allow any opportunity that we can. We don't want to limit everybody because we can't do it for all of the fall sports. So Mr. Jarvis has worked very hard on a system to put in place. As of this Friday afternoon, we will be ready to allow spectators at our home events only. We will not be allowing visiting teams to bring any spectators with them. And to my knowledge right now, and I need to reinforce this, I don't know of any neighboring school districts that allow visiting teams to bring spectators. And I need to encourage the Guilford parents to please respect those limitations. Just as we will expect visiting teams not to bring spectators into our school property, I have to ask the Guilford parents to respect those limitations. There may be one district that has opened up to allowing neighboring spectators. I think it's East Haven off the top of my head, but no other competition allows visitors to have spectators. And I really need to ask our Guilford parents to be good neighbors and to respect those restrictions. And that would conclude my report for tonight. I apologize for the length of this.
No, it's important, very important stuff. Okay, we're now going to go to the board agenda part of the meeting. 9.1 is to act on personnel items. I am going to ask for a motion to ratify the resignation of the following teacher, Erin Mello. Is there a motion to ratify that resignation?
John Bell, so moved.
Second, Kristen Peck.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And is there a motion to ratify the appointment of the following teacher? Shannon Duggan, Adams Middle School Art. Says Mr. Sands, I see a move, and Dr. Best, second. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Next, we have a number of items in a row that are received items. These are textbook recommendations. I note that there are 5, I believe. Do we want to talk about this, or?
I'm about to turn it over to Dr. Crystal, but before I do, I just really want to note and appreciate Mr. Russo and Mr. Pino, who have been troopers and have been here since 7:30 listening to me talk for about 5 hours, and they're here for these textbooks. So I know it's late, but Dr. Crystal will begin the overview. Both of these gentlemen can speak to the text if you would like them to, and they're certainly here to answer any questions that the board may have. And thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman and Dr. Tracy. There are 5 textbooks I have sitting here for specifically for the IB history coursework. The first one is called Rights and Protests. The second one is called The Second World War in the Americas, 1933 to 1945. The third one is called The Cold War in the Americas, 1945 to 1981. And the fourth one is called Evolution and Development of Democratic States, 1848 to 2000. And the fifth one is Independence Movements, 1800 to 2000. And I'm going to ask Mr. Russo and Mr. Buno if they want to speak with regard to the process that the high school went through to select these textbooks for your approval.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for allowing us to be here tonight. We appreciate it. And Dr. Freeman, thank you for your words as well. We appreciate that. To clarify, just a few reminders about our IB history curriculum. It is a 2-year course. So our students who are enrolled in both the diploma and the certificate program begin their studies junior year and move through the 2-year track. These texts have been selected to help support the units of study over that 2-year curriculum. They help to inform the research that they're conducting for both internal and external assessments, as well as their final examinations, which are moderated by the International Baccalaureate. Our committee actually has had a very long process of examining different texts along the way. So our International Baccalaureate was implemented in 2017. We've been using them to help supplement that work, but we found along the way that these texts best inform the work that our students are doing around these specific units of study throughout their 2 years. Mr. Russo, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to those comments.
I would just like to thank Kevin for helping facilitate the discussion of the process with our teachers and IB. There was quite a bit of feedback gathered from students and the teachers who teach the courses. And I just wanted to note that that was part of the process.
This is a receive-only item. These books will be available at Lathrop House between now and your next regular monthly meeting, and they'll be available for your review or for anybody in the community to stop by and review if they choose to do so. If you want to note that you need to have a mask if you're going to visit us at Lathrop House.
Wonderful. Well, truly, thank you so much for being here. And it's great. It'll be great to have the opportunity to kind of look through these before our next meeting. Any questions for Mr. Russo or Mr. Bruno?
I feel bad. They've been here for a long time.
I know. I should have thought of moving things around.
No, please ask for a question.
We enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Okay, so again, a reminder that these 5 textbooks are received items, and we will be acting on them at our next regular meeting at the beginning of November. The next item on our agenda, 9.7, is to act on the submission of consolidated grants application.
Thank you. That's mine.
That's me. All right. Thank you, Dr. Bissell.
You should have a handout in your packet that talks about the title grants. We have title 1, 2, 3, and 4. They've all just been submitted. The only thing really of note here, other than the description of general description of the monies being allocated to specific things, is that the amounts have dropped over the last couple of years. Every year they seem to go down a little more. The only title grant that went up this year was the Title III grant for English language acquisition, and it only went up by about $1,000. So the other ones have gone down, but these are recurring grants, so they come every year. The funds come every year, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I think you kind of answered one of my questions, which is these are not numbers which we compile based on work we think we want to do. These are the numbers that are available for application.
They're
given to us with those amounts.
That's right. Okay.
Entitlements based in the Every Student Succeeds Act, and they're based on our demographics, and they tell us how much money and so, when you hear people talk about federal education dollars, you're talking about $198,000 in Guilford.
Right. Any questions about this item? All right, so this is an act-on item, so I'm going to ask for a motion to approve these federal program entitlements, the submission of these consolidated grant applications. Mr. Sands, I see a hand. What did I do? Sorry. A second, Moira, Ms. Prater, I see a second. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, I see all hands. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, 9.8 is to receive the 2021-2022 preliminary budget timeline. we get to this point every year and can't believe that we're already talking about next year's
I really can't believe
next
this.
year's budget. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Freeman. We do each have a budget timeline in front of us. Do you have anything that you wanted to say about it?
No, I really
Okay.
just want to bring this to your attention. It is the traditional calendar for budget approval. We hope that we will be able to follow and maintain a traditional calendar, but as with everything else, we want to note that we may need to have some flexibility with these dates moving forward.
Right. So for the viewing public, I want to remind you of a couple of important steps in this budget process. Again, this is a process that has already begun. So the Guilford Public Schools District Leadership Team has already started discussing their budgets for next year. The first time that the public has an the public always has an opportunity to reach out to us, but we have at the end of October, Wednesday, October 28th, a Board of Ed Operations Committee workshop for public input. We will not have a budget at that point. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on what they would like to see as budget priorities. Normally, we would have this as an in-person meeting. We will be setting this up as a Zoom meeting that allows the public to come into the meeting and then pose questions or comments to the board. So we will be communicating exactly when that will be and give people what they need to join if they're interested.
Dr. Bellis-Tracy, I'm just thinking that because of the Zoom format, even more so than in most years, it may be important to remind the community that it's the board's chance to hear from the community, but may be difficult to engage in a back and forth conversation. But certainly the opportunity, you know, in the best sense of a public hearing, to listen to concerns and comments and suggestions raised from the community, even if we can't engage in a really effective back and forth dialogue.
Right, thank you, absolutely. Just two other things I want to note in this timeline as I look at it and am reminded of our process. We do have an opportunity to spend some time with the Board of Finance over this process, which really allows us to clarify them what we're thinking about, where our priorities are, and allows them to ask questions. And then the other thing, it seems far away, but time seems to fly these days. At the end of January, there will be two public hearings, Monday, January 25th and Tuesday, January 26th, where the public again gets the opportunity to address the board, but these will be these opportunities will be once there is an actual draft budget in front of us. So it actually gives the public the opportunity to address particular items that have been proposed, as well as noting other questions or concerns. All right, so that is the receive item tonight. The next item on the agenda, 9.9, is a one-year extension of the Guilford Association of Educational Support Services and United Public Service Employees Union. This is the para and clerical contract, draft contract that's been put in front of us following contract negotiations. I think is it Mrs. Trudeau who's going to provide us with some details.
Okay, so this was just a one-year extension to the contract.
Can you come closer to the microphone, Linda? I'm sorry. Maybe that one down the end would be perfect. Thank you. Just want to make sure folks can hear.
I, like Katie, have not been told that people cannot hear me, so this is unusual.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
So this was just a one-year extension of their contract. The only changes to the contract was a 0.5% increase to the premium cost share that the employees will pay for their insurance. And all employees will receive a step increase. And those at top step would receive a 2% increase in this contract. There was no other changes in the contract other than those items.
Linda, could I make an amendment to that? Actually, the agreement provides a 1% increase in the employee contribution. It's a 0.5% increase until August of this year, and then another 0.5% from then until the end of the contract.
Not what I had in my notes.
It actually,
If you read the contract, that's
yeah,
what it
but
says.
Mr. Sands, I'm wondering if in fact it actually, I'm looking at the bottom of page 16, if it actually stays the same as last year for that first month and then increases by a 0.5% at the beginning of August.
Yes, that was my understanding, was that it was not retroactive to July 1st, that it increased as of the first paycheck of the school year, which was the end of August.
So
The first payday, I believe, was August 28th, and that was the first paycheck where they had the increase, and I believe it was only 0.5%.
I'm going to suggest that we table this. I want to make sure that we touch base with the other party that was involved in this negotiation. I want to clarify that we all understand this, right? This is going to be retroactive in any case. I don't think that delaying for 2 weeks. We will put this on your workshop agenda and we will approve it in 2 weeks at the workshop agenda. But let's cycle back, let's circle back and speak with the other party and make sure that we're all on the same page.
All right. Are there any other questions from board members? We have obviously a clean copy and a red line copy of this draft. All right, so it sounds like
We'll just table that. Yep.
Made some clarification there. All right. All right. 9.10 is policy committee has a number of policies and regulations to bring to us as receive items. Is there someone on the policy committee who wants to present these to us?
Did we lose Moira? Jason, do you want to?
Sure. Are you in a position? Sorry, Mr. Bowden, to put you on the spot. Thank you. Oh, Moira's computer froze. She's rebooting. So, Mr. Bowden, go ahead.
I also saw communication there. 1,500 homes out in Guilford without power right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've noticed that. So this will all be archived. Folks who may have wanted to be here live may have to watch us as a recorded version.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, good evening. I have 3 policies to present as receive items tonight. I'll ask Linda to help me with the procurement piece, but the policy committee met at its last meeting and reviewed a new policy. It's a complete revision of the 1972 Title IX law. In May of this year, the Department of Education issued a new document that they refer to as the final regulations, which became effective as of August 14th. The new Title IX regulation holds schools accountable for failure to respond equitably and promptly to sexual misconduct incidents. These regulations, unlike past guidance issued from the Office of Civil Rights, have the full effect of law now and override any past guidance, hence the complete replacement that we received from CAVE. It's important to note that these final regulations are a significant change on how Title IX is managed and include extensive procedural requirements. So the main components that you see in the 2 policies and regulations that are presented as you read through them for the next meeting is a complete new definition of what constitutes sexual harassment, a duty for schools to only investigate complaints of conduct that occurred within their programs or activities, an adoption of what is defined as actual knowledge and deliberate indifference as a standard, and a detailed grievance process for formal complaints of sexual harassment. The two policies that are, and regulations that are presented, the 4112 refers to our staff. They're exactly, are very much the same. And the 5004 refers to our students. So as you go through, you'll see that there's the procedural components and timelines are well thought out and specified. And I'd ask you to read through carefully and be able to answer any questions in between board meetings or at the next board meeting.
Wonderful. Anybody have any questions at the moment? No. Okay. Thank you so much for stepping in.
The second policy is to be announced in terms of number, but it has to deal with purchasing and procurement. As Mrs. Trudeau has presented at the policy meeting, it is required component of our policy book by state or by?
It's a federal requirement in order to continue to receive a little bit of federal funds that we receive. We must have this procurement policy in place.
What you see before you is an adaptation of what the current town, Guilford town, it has in effect. We tweaked it a little bit, but it's consistent with what they have on the town side. That is receive item only.
Right.
And the last policy is the operations of schools during COVID-19 pandemic. That is a policy that we're continually going to add to as we go through this process. It explicitly denotes a new policy regarding mask wearing in the schools. I would ask you to read it carefully. And again, for any input that you may have, the policy committees moving forward regarding mask wearing, and exemptions and provisions for special education students.
All right. Terrific. So again, these are received items. I will note that a couple of them are fairly lengthy.
Don't wait till the last minute.
I was just going to say, don't try to read those before during lunch on the day of the board meeting. Yeah, but it sounds like we could certainly reach out to Mr. Boder, Mrs. Trudeau, or Moira Rader for someone on the policy committee if we have any questions in the meantime.
I think it's important to note that both the Title IX revisions would align itself to now, as I described, federal law, and the COVID-related policy and regulations is consistent with the Department of Health provisions and the CDC. So it puts us in alignment with what they currently have out.
Wonderful. Okay, very helpful. All right. The last item.
Amy.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Katie, it's Moira. I apologize. I'm using my phone to dial back in. My computer froze. So I apologize if Jason had to review anything. But yeah, like Jason, I just cut the last tail end. But if anybody has any questions and wants to reach out between now and our next meeting, please do so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So 9.11 is to approve Guilford Public Schools priorities and objectives. We did discuss this in detail at our last meeting, but I am going to turn it over to Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Dr. Bellis-Tracy. So we did spend an entire meeting discussing this the last time we met. What I have in front of you today, I hope captures that conversation. So when we look at our priorities and initiatives for this coming school year, I feel really good about the fact that our priorities remain unchanged. The three priorities have been consistent over the last several years. The first one speaks to creating the physical and emotional safe and healthy environment. And all that we did this year after our last meeting was include a parenthetical statement so that it reads, our schools will be physically and emotionally safe, healthy, equitable, and caring places for learning for students and adults, built upon supportive relationships and positive decision-making. There was a concern expressed among the board members that this policy not forget about the adults, the teachers and the staff members who come into our buildings every day as well. The second priority speaks to the professional environment around teaching and learning that we strive to create, a really thoughtful academic environment that supports professional educators. And then the third priority speaks to the academic environment that we strive to create. And those things don't change this year. Those three priorities remain the same. We want to be a healthy place for people to be. We want to be a really rich and vigorous academic, professional academic location. And we really focus on the classroom environment as being the most important place in our system. The initiatives this year are almost all wholly new, and they really focus on the reality in which we find ourselves. That first initiative says that we will maintain health and hygiene protocols and practices to provide a safe and healthy in-person environment for all students and members of the school community. Unlike any year before, that has to be our single driving initiative this year. It's what we talked about as we talked about the logic and the rationale behind whether or not we're ready to fully open the schools. And so that will be the focus of much of our attention and work this year. Secondly, we will support a blended learning environment that promotes deep learning and academic disciplines through the principles of learning, high leverage practices, and formative assessment, as well as social and emotional wellness through culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and digitally responsible instructional practices and expectations for students who are attending schools both in person or virtually. I really appreciate the feedback from the board to make this more specific and concrete, not just to write it as a lofty goal, but to specifically lean on those foundational pieces like the principles of learning in this district, the high leverage practices, and a thoughtful use of formative assessment. And to be specific about the fact that, again, we're looking at culturally responsive instruction. We're concerned about students' emotional wellness, and we recognize that many of them have gone through and continue to go through trauma right now. And because of this virtual component, that we not forget to talk about the digital civics of all of this, and that we're constantly thoughtful about the digital responsibility that we're asking the students to embrace. And then finally, and we've spent a significant amount of time talking about this, but that we intend not to use the pandemic as an excuse. We intend to further develop a culture and our instructional practices that foster equity and social justice in our school community. I appreciate the simplicity of these. I think they're better for the conversation that we had at your last meeting. We're a little bit late in adopting these. We usually have these approved before the end of September, but this is an unusual year. There is nothing that requires you to approve these tonight, although I do think that they stand in front of you in a good place at this time.
Any thoughts, comments, questions? All right, so I am going to entertain a motion to approve these district priorities and objectives.
So,
Kristen Patrick.
second.
Second, Dr. Hirsch. All in favor? Aye. All right, that is everyone in support.
Thank you all for all the time. Very good.
All righty, we are getting towards the end of our meeting. We are up to number 10 for reports on committees. Policy committee, I don't know if you have anything additional to what's been reviewed to date, Moira?
The next policy committee meeting, Katie, so I couldn't hear, sorry,
Do
the audio.
do you have any additional report from the policy committee? Obviously, you've already given.
No, just to add that obviously, like everything else, that we need to be fluid about things. If Jason or I identify something, we may need to build upon the COVID policy we just spoke to, but at this time, our next meeting is scheduled for November 23rd.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Operations committee, Mr. Sands, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, we had a very extensive meeting earlier, and I think we're up to date.
All right. Curriculum Inspection and Assessment Committee?
Yes, we are meeting on October 26th. And as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we would like to, we hope to discuss in maybe a little bit more detail than we heard about tonight, the administration's response to the requests in terms of curriculum, addressing the issues around race and diversity and those subject matters. So it should be pretty interesting.
Terrific. Liaisons to town committees. Anyone have a Board of Ed relevant report? No, I'm seeing shaking heads. Liaison to the Learn Board of Directors.
Last week, the Learn Board of Directors is a regional education system that runs here all the way from Stonington. I'm happy to say that at the last part of that meeting, we actually got to have a little bit of just open conversation about how our districts are doing. And I was very proud to represent how Guilford was doing in light of the pandemic. I felt like we were really, truly like doing the best out of the region in terms of a plan and following our plan. And we just seemed, I felt very comfortable and confident talking about where we are in the results. That was nice. A lot of the other areas are struggling with subs, which is why I had asked that question earlier, that we're really struggling to find staffing. And our magnet schools are struggling. The group of schools that Learn manages are having a hard time staying open. So my heart goes out to them. I don't even know what they can possibly do to try to keep themselves open and support some of our kids that really need it the most. They're really struggling.
Oh, that's really
It is. It's so sad. So it's a lot of our students that wind up needing the most attention, and they're just home.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for your continued, once again, I've noted this before, but this is our participation in Learn. For many years, we tried to take turns every month, and it meant that sometimes we got there and sometimes we didn't, and it wasn't a consistent participation. So thank you so much for doing that, because it really enhances what we learn from it and what we can, how we can participate. So terrific. This next item, 11, is typically public questions. So it gives me an opportunity again to remind the community that they can reach out to Dr. Freeman, myself, or any board member if you have a question or concern or a comment. And that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Del Ventura, sorry, Ms. Peck, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everyone. Please stay safe. Thank you for joining us.
Covered a lot of ground. Thank you, guys.